One setup Machiavelli uses is as Rhetorica outlines. First, build a contempt and vitriolic hatred into the downside of an outcome. Then build in a sense of justice and moral justification and promise of riches and good things in the upside of that event. In a basic structure like this, we might proclaim that on one side we're doing God's righteous work, while liberating the good people and making good deals, and freeing the state from evil barbarians that are enslaving the locals. Yeah, that kind of thing. A propulsion system of indignation on one side and compassion on the other. Gain and pain. Much like the fetch my badge, or be a darling and buzz the door for this lost lamb. I suppose we are going to have to add Eugene Schwartz's breakthrough advertising program to this list to deconstruct, and maybe Ty Lopez's Persuasion program, though, like the entrepreneur and money programs, it's not bad, it's good stuff, but not much more than you'll find in Drucker, Fabozzi, Cialdini and Schwartz. Actually, Fabozzi far exceeds Lopez's money program, but I digress. Look up Professor Krasimir Petrov here on YouTube. He gives his lecture series away for freebies. It's foundational MBA stuff. Link in description. But if you can plough through Rhetorica ad Herenium, it's all there. Eugene Schwartz, Dan Kennedy, Dave Trott, Ogilvy. It's all the same major themes, all described in Rhetorica 2,000 years ago. Anyway, that's the value add, back to the main feature. So, quick recap. Introductions, well disposed, attentive, and receptive. And Machiavelli pays homage and appreciation to the reader. I think we've already done this. The future would-be prince, or in modern times, CEO, or state leader, politician. President, Prime Minister, elected king, whatever. He acknowledges what's important to them, makes the reader better disposed. It's perhaps worth a quick mention that taking a moment to work out what is important to the audience is to pay it due care and attention, to pay it respect, in a word. And by doing this, we acknowledge their world and recognise all the structures and nuances that come with it. Even if we don't know the specifics, by respecting it, we're acknowledging, yes, I don't know you, but I see you. I don't know your story, but I know that you have them. To plough on regardless, or otherwise, is to say, I don't see you, I don't care about your stories, I don't even know or acknowledge that you have stories. This is the way it's going to be, I'm laying down the law. That's contemptuous, and it rubs people the wrong way. And I suppose if you subscribe to the kind of Myers-Briggs personality types, people start responding with their superego, which I understand is an inverted kind of cognitive function of last resort. Seems to make sense. I'll have to look into it further, but maybe this is why violence follows contempt, because you've tried everything else. You've tried to get on with people, you try to be reasonable, you try to negotiate, you try to be respectful. But when people start pushing you down shame, blame, humiliation, and finally into contempt, there's only one thing left that you haven't tried. The only problem with that is, I suspect that to do violence is to unlock or take off the restraints. And then it just seems to spiral out of control. It's like, let me do some carefully moderated violence. Nah, when you do violence, it's just all out. It's nasty stuff. So Machi's proposition to the reader is simple. The reader gives up time. Machiavelli gifts the blueprints, the means, the methods, the means to serve justice on the common enemy, and also the method to enable or empower those under their charge. That's quite a hook. And in the first few paragraphs, Machiavelli has aligned a well-disposed and attentive reader. Free the slaves, make them rich, and at the same time vanquish the oppressive and evil enemy, compassion and indignation. Well, where do we see this today? On YouTube. Oh gosh, take any woo-woo peddler. How do all those videos start? I'm going to reveal the secret they don't want you to know. Big Pharma, evil CDC, or big government are keeping the secret from you. That if you knew the secret, you could free yourself from your mortal bonds. No longer would you have to pay Big Pharma or your insurance company or big government or the big electric companies your hard-earned money. No, all you need to do is lick your cancer clean, drink the magic water and be cured forever, or build this contraption with magnets and have free energy because Nikola Tesla or something. Yeah, no need for wicked vaccines. Stay out of schools and the indoctrination engine. NASA, never a stray answer. Sound familiar? Not to say that some conspiracies aren't true, then it comes back to the presentation, the slick graphics, or the whiz-bangs, the dazzle and razzle to distract us, to keep you listening just another minute, all short-term focused, all the while building this propulsion system of indignation and compassion to you, to your cause, dear reader. And as Eugene Schwartz advocates, Machiavelli too, create a massive contrasting effect. Those evil forces out there, ready to shred, invade, rape and pillage our own town of noble and humble folk, hard-working folk who have toiled the lands for decades to make a good life. And should those evil forces act, a man's very life efforts will be snuffed out, all for naught. Again, I point to the Middle East. Recent events and the 15 years of effort there wiped out by an error in statecraft. You get the picture though. Ramp it up. Compare it to some horrific incident of history that is parallel to the concerns we're talking about, that your reader will know about. And here, therefore, we must know the reader somewhat. A simple example. Consider two statements, and you tell me which is the more appealing or captivating. The cat chased the dog. The dog was chased by the cat. The meaning is the same, but which sentence should we use to express this scenario or this event? Depends. Are we provoking dog lovers or cat lovers? Because if we're talking to cat lovers and we say the dog, they've already switched off. The cat, what was that about cat? Was chased. Was it? What was that? What was going to hurt? Who's hassling the cat? Yeah. So it comes to that humorous observation that dogs say, my owner brings me food, provides me shelter and gives me love. He must be a god. The cat says, my owner brings me food, provides me shelter and gives me love. I must be a god. So yeah, exaggerate this contrast, make it more real than real. Paint the picture, fill in the details from every which way, all angles, make it tangible, sizzle it up, really, really ramp it up. Breakthrough to advertising goes to the nth degree on the techniques to do this. What else have we got? Yeah, storytelling, the narrative, we've done a little bit of that. The hero's journey, the anatomy of story, John Truby, the Disney film structure, frames, Oren Klaff, contrast, conflict with Marshall Rosenberg. Though Rosenberg is about resolving and reducing the tension, here we want to amp it up before we solve it for people. Then ram in some emotional content in that wide gap, craft the narrative to do it, a story from the past that echoes your plight, our plight, their plight, one that carries appropriate charge and pulls the reader, the interlocutor, towards our inevitable conclusion. We've only just got our first three conditions met: a disposed audience, attentive and receptive. Persuasion is the process of inducing others to give fair, favourable or undivided attention to propositions. Therefore, next, Machiavelli goes on to prove his case. If we can demonstrate a coherent and cogent argument, one that is internally consistent, that is grounded and virtuous and eloquent and deserving, and maybe even a system that we have used, that we've used it because the greats have used it, and if it can be demonstrated that it is, which we claim, our case may rest. It's not enough that we appeal to people's good nature. We hold them to the highest standard of their personal hero. Ask them, you want to be just like your hero, don't you? But, be subtle about it. Again, recall the two approaches, direct and oblique. The fact that people might be falling short of performing to a level of hero is to point out a flaw, which is to discredit them, so we need to take the oblique approach. A prudent man would follow in the footsteps of the greatest of men, and then leave them to fill in the gap. Again, I make mention of Eugene Schwartz, make use of similes, metaphors, and Steve Scott calls them emotive word pictures. So an emotionally charged story is easy to recall, it's hard to forget, and has a quality that, if concise enough, if compact enough, and has high fidelity, the reader or interlocutor will want to tell someone else about it. A meme, perhaps what I once thought was a mind virus, but I've learned that has a specific meaning in psychology. Clear and concise message with an emotional component also gets replayed in the mind of the listener. Complex, technical, and overwhelming data gets lost. It's not human nature. The hook, salt, emotional word picture. I've mentioned it a few times. I don't know whether we've actually deconstructed it. The hook, salt, emotional word picture. Steve Scott tells a story in his book about hooking people and salting people. The old adage, you can take a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. And he says, well, if you put salt in its oats, of course it's going to drink. There was a documentary I watched many, many years ago, and it was about the native peoples of Australia, I think. And they were on, I don't know whether it's still called walkabout, but living off the land, and they showed how they find water. And the locals know that there's certain monkeys that are very inquisitive, and they certainly know where all the water holes are. But the monkeys are a little bit sly, and they don't reveal where their water source is, for obvious reasons. So the chap demonstrating bushcraft has in his pocket, or in his leather strap, a rock salt. about the size of a human fist. And he goes out into a kind of a deserty area, a little bit of soft ground, not too hard, not too soft. Finds a stick and he digs a hole into the ground. Digs it about 8 inches down, just wide enough for the rock salt to fit in. And then he'll dig out the bottom a little bit wider than the top. And he'll put the rock salt in the hole, and then he'll walk 20, 30 feet away. And all these monkeys have been watching him all the while. And so he's been very conspicuous about trying to hide this rock salt. So he's not showing the monkeys what it is. He's pretending that he's burying something valuable. And of course, monkeys get curious and they all want to know. But of course, there's 20 or 30 monkeys now, and they're all curious about what this fellow's just buried. But of course, they're all a little bit wary. The guy, he's still there 20, 30 feet away, leaning against a tree, just waiting for one of the monkeys to go for it. But of course, all the monkeys start to get a little bit anxious now, and they're all edging closer and closer to where this chap buried the rock salt. And they all want to know what it is. But a little bit of game theory here, because if one monkey goes and gets it, he'll be advantaged because he'll have got it. So all the other monkeys are kind of out edging each other. One moves closer, another moves closer still, and another moves closer still. All the while, the guy's watching him and he's only 20, 30 feet away. It's a bit close. And eventually one of the monkeys will break out and make a mad dash, and he'll go to the hole and he'll put his hand in it and grab the rock salt. At which point, our bushman comes running towards the monkey, but the monkey's so greedy that it's got its hand around the rock salt. But because the hole's only just wide enough for the rock salt, because he's clasped his hand around a rock salt, the hole isn't wide enough for a hand being splayed wide open while it contains the rock salt. So in essence, it's trapped the monkey's hand in this hole, and it won't let go, and then panic sets in, and it can't decide whether it wants its freedom or the rock salt. And so it kind of does this mad mind scramble of fight, flight, freeze, appease, what should I do, blah, 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 blah. Wants both, and it's too late. Our bushman's there, and he's now strapped a rope around the monkey's neck. Anyway, he does whatever he needs to. Now he'll tap the monkey's wrist, it'll let go, and he'll kind of drag the monkey off and tie it to the nearest tree. And then the monkey's now secured. Our bushcraft man will go and retrieve the rock salt and give it to the monkey. And the monkey will sit there, looking a bit pissed off and forlorn. Maybe all his mates are there laughing at him, whatever. And he'll stay tied up for a good 6 hours under the hot sun with nothing to chew on except a rock salt. So he's been hooked and he's now been salted. And you can imagine, here's this primate with all this fur in 40-degree heat, chained up, frustrated, and with nothing to eat or drink except this massive chunk of rock salt. Well, we'll come back to what happened in a little bit. But the point is, we can leverage what we know exists in the minds of our audience. We can take for granted almost people have heard the story of the hare and the tortoise, or we can usually fall back on some other folklore or some other cultural reference point. Again, as Rhetorica suggests, don't lie, that's the injunction of Rhetorica. And here, Machiavelli actually diverges from the ancient text. Where necessary, he advises the use of fraud. Though Machiavelli clarifies, this is not glorious at all, nor will it bring glory, even though it may bring kingdoms, but fraud should be reserved for active enemies engaging in war. Nothing new then. It seems that telling blatant lies in today's political climate has no consequence. In the UK, I believe the courts ruled that politicians need not tell the truth to the media, nor are they accountable for telling lies. However, this is not quite the same as Machiavelli's edict. In the context of The Prince, the way I read it, it's that such a politician would necessarily be at war with the electorate if he did such a thing, and I do wonder. When it comes to statecraft, The Prince, the goal of concern are security and power. Security, the protection of the state's fuel, food, trade, infrastructure, military, and in regard to power, money, and alliances. And power seems to me is the ability to restrict or control people's choices in a way that they're okay with. They submit to that, or simply they just don't see it. They don't recognise that you've either restricted or provided those choices which are convenient to you. They just see it as, this is the way of things, this is the way it is. So in this kind of flux and chaos of human endeavours, Machiavelli gives us guidance. Honour is the top priority until security is. And then one can lie and cheat to restore security, and after that, the courage and glory of battle will restore honour. Honour, once again, atop, until something else becomes necessary. And as we said before, Rule 303, if you have the means at hand, you have the obligation to act. So my take on honour is respect. It's a strange thing in human dynamics. It contains fortitude, wisdom and steadfastness. We can have respect for people who actually do live according to their rules. They walk the talk. Hypocrisy is not respected. Those who do the difficult things, not just because they are hard, but because it's the right thing to do over self-service, over taking the easy option, are generally respected. Playing by the rules and knowing when to break them also carries respect and wins honour. And it struck me reading The Prince that these virtues or aspirations are in service of protection and nurturing over and above self-indulgence, or taking the easy option. And it occurred to me that this is what happens in interpersonal dynamics. When we judge someone, either directly or obliquely, we are imposing our evaluations. We are saying we know what's right or true. And in the case where two people disagree, which is more often the case, our imposition can be taken as a slight. So consider also then that when we meet new people or new situations, we're really trying to work out friend or foe. And so we are protective of ourselves, our beliefs, our identities, property and relationships and so on. So we've built our little kingdom, whether it be a lifelong effort of developing ideas, beliefs, or something more real, like a business or an asset. An external agent introduces themselves and then makes a judgment about our life's work or investments. Are they respecting us? No, not really. And, in transactional analysis, we have this kind of inner parent that will take steps to protect and almost reject further intrusion. So for all its criticisms and whether it's actually woo-woo or not, the kind of assumptions in NLP and other communication models is that people are doing the best they can with the resources they have. I think it's not a bad presupposition to have. Whether it's true, I don't know, but it's perhaps useful to accept as true. This is one of those oblique approaches. We don't say, hey, your life is shit, but I guess you did the best you could with what you had. That's direct and judgmental. So we distance from it, and we would say something one step removed. Life is full of adversity, and those with fortitude and compassion to endure have a lot to teach others. That's kind of like being respectful. It makes the assumption that the other person's built something or crafted something or done better with what they've had. They've been a multiplier. They've created something. And there's some stuff in some kind of interpersonal dynamics models that says what a man is looking for from a woman is her respect. She ideally respects him, and that respect is an acknowledgement that he's a plus one. He's creating something. He's creating more than he consumes, that kind of thing. So he has an equity that's left over for provision. And then conversely, what the woman's seeking from the man is loving and compassion. I don't know. You see, it's too convenient for it to fit in this kind of model. I don't know. As Carl Jung said, every individual is an exception to the rule. These models, all well and good, they look great on paper, but I don't know. So it's this oblique approach. Being respectful, being careful with how we approach people. Same thing with kids. We don't ask our kids who their best friend at school is. They may be embarrassed about that or still forming ideas about the implications and social meaning of like and best, because it means ruling out other people. And, what's the implications of that? They may not have thought about it before. So it's quite a big one to dump on the kid. We can ask them though, hey, who do you sit next to in class? Ensure that this was a free choice though. If not, why not? I'm going to assume they sit next to people they like, right? Yeah. Should I get into this? Same thing with preferred pronouns, I guess. Even on a surface level, without going deep into that subject, calling people what they prefer to be called is, in the least, to act in a respectful way. And here too, I kind of had a mini revelation. Surprising, actually, came to me this late in life. It's one of those Myers-Briggs things. I'll mention it a bit later. But the judging aspects of one of the component types in the Myers-Briggs model, the way we filter and process information. The Myers-Briggs, introverted, extroverted, intuitive, perceiving, thinking, judging, whatever they are, I can't remember. But I recall a little incident that happened many, many moons ago. It's one that occurred with one of the ex-girlfriends. So there we were in a little flat in North London, some easy weekend morning. Sun was shining and it was going to be a nice day wandering around the city. And I was cooking breakfast. Nothing flash, the usual. Sausages, fried onions, scrambled eggs. So I served it up and she saw it. and she started to retch. I couldn't believe it. There was a long hair wrapped around the scrambled eggs. Oh, behave, I said. It's not that bad. Only years later now do I realise the errors of my ways. Oh, you poor fool, John. What were you thinking? And this is it. At the time, my judgment then was stated as some external, all-encompassing judgment in the context of all things in the world to retch about. It was an external perception of the world. It's externalised. It is not that bad. It was an external observation. When here was this person, girlfriend at the time, who was having a real and vivid reaction in her world. So not only had I imposed my judgment, but I did it from the reference point of my own external thinking. I'd not even entered her world, but the INTJ type, what can I tell you? It has extroverted thinking and introverted feeling. So I had a response to my external perceptions. Her feelings, reactions, thoughts and perceptions have been bypassed altogether. This is the problem with reacting and not taking the time to slow down and respond. So in this, my error, I realised too late, is that I had not been respectful and it was a dishonourable judgment. Of course, I got my due punishment, which I attributed to external crazy bitchiness. At least I felt bad about that. See, again, it's a bad habit. I can't get away from it. I only just considered that what she might have been feeling all day for the rest of the day too. It took me years to realise, but I got there. If only I could remember her name. What was it? Of course I remember her name. I'm only mucking about. Too quick to criticise, see? Yeah, reaction rather than response. So it wouldn't have taken very much, would it? It wouldn't have cost very much to have said, oh my gosh, you had quite a reaction to that. You must feel quite repulsed. Let me take it away from your sight so you don't have to suffer from it anymore, and let me whip up some more eggs. So yeah, I do have to pause then and consider what's the thought process of those who say things like, calling people by their preferred pronouns is just enabling a delusion. Same kind of thinking, isn't it? It's calling people by their preferred pronouns is just enabling a delusion. So there's an external judgment fired off an internal reaction. What makes that valid? It seems everyone has a license to practice analytical psychiatry and make psychiatric diagnosis. Again, there's an attempt to discredit, make a judgment, and invite others to do so. So much to be said on this, the backfire effect. And proving people wrong actually causes them to dig their heels in further and become belligerent. Some studies showing that when someone is proved wrong, the same part of the brain is activated as when real pain occurs. I see how proponents of the Myers-Briggs model argue the case that it's the parent archetype detecting a threat and going into a protective mode, and we react, fight, flight, freeze, peace, submit. It's an identity protective cognition, and I suppose it also makes sense that whatever is the most developed cognitive function in the mind is the one that is selected as being the best capable or able to respond. So I'm going to guess accordingly, if we're using Myers-Briggs model, it has described cognitive functions which are moralistic principles, rationality, logic, ethics, willpower, loyalty and duty. And so it's my presumption that whichever one of those modes and models or cognitive functions that a person is most comfortable with, that's most efficient in using, will select that one to combat, deal with, handle, process any incoming data. So, for example, someone who's very moralistic when given an order might just say, well, I have issues with that. It clashes my morals. I'm a conscientious objector. I'm not going to do it. Someone who is very high in their loyalty or duty. Yes, sir, I'll do that. No problem. No morals. So two very different responses to the same stimulus. So I kind of leave that one there lingering, and perhaps that's my oblique way of asking, how are you responding with threats to identity, beliefs and values? Or is that too direct? Yeah, what do we do? Do we have an outburst of moral indignation or principle violations, or a fit of calling someone irrational, or do we accuse them of being illogical, or scream at them as unethical, or do we impose our will and fight? Or out of loyalty or duty, do we appease or submit? It seems to fit. But this is it. If we're at choice point in how we react to these, if we know we're kind of like loyalty and duty bound people, then when someone gives us an order, we generally just follow it because that's the kind of person we are. But knowing that there's another cognitive function in there called morality, and that we actually do have a choice to say no, and sometimes, even though it might not feel right, we nevertheless can realise that we can still take that course of action. So on occasion it is necessary to not be good. Bandmaster. Evil Inside Human Violence and Cruelty, a book I've had on the bookshelf for a couple of years, and I've started it more than once. Wouldn't mind getting to that. Yeah, especially when dealing with liars, unscrupulous and bad faith actors. It is annoying that such behaviour compels us, necessitates us to not be good, to not be honest. I fucking hate that imposition, and I resent it. And there's me getting all irrational and emotional again. My personal insistence is to always keep the other as a human being with needs. Machiavelli's text is kind of ambivalent. Yes, of course, do that when it suits, but when it does not, he advocates the opposite, that all are pawns to be placed and used, and if each pawn gets a good life, all the better. But for 1 minute, we should not forget pawns are there to be used when it becomes necessary to maintain security, power, and then through this, honour is validated. So we might see how one interpretation of the prince is to dare taunt the Medici into changing their ways. Art also plays an important part in excellent statecraft and good governance. You may notice, and I think I've stated, what often precedes a fascist state is restriction and abolishment of the arts. Surprisingly then, it seems that Machiavelli is a bit of a humanist. He's all about virtue, the pursuit of happiness, embracing individual interests and self-actualization, diverse interests, and to be interested in all peoples and their follies, but also in their strengths and preservations of the state of affairs. That is honourable and virtuous, and creating the environment for the subjects or citizens to flourish is, of course, providing security and removing immediate concerns by ensuring that the basics and necessities of life are provided for, such that the time horizons of special interests can be afforded. Specialisations then arise, expertise flourishes, and all the things that come with that. Of course, this is not altruistic, but totally self-serving in securing power and wealth of the state. Yes, the old gross domestic product. However, Machiavelli seemed to be more aware of the human condition and realised that while Rhetorica's model was clean-cut and elegant, had nice balanced equations, if you like, just like the efficient market hypothesis, what we've come to realise is that people don't actually act rationally nor predictably. The ultimatum game illustrates this. Machiavelli added the sharp edge, cajole, encourage, hold people to the law, which is an agreement between the peoples. And when someone no longer wants to adhere to the agreements they made by consent, acquiesced or otherwise, they are actually fighting with themselves on some level. This is absurd and irrational. And perhaps why even today when people try to argue about taxes and the legal fictions of government institutions, that they get a letter from said legal fiction asking the name of their psychiatric practitioner. It's pathetic on all sides, and yet here we are, legal fiction sending out letters telling people they're delusional. Whatever. Anyway, we can argue about the meanings, letter of the law, spirit of the law, tie up the administration in long legal debates, and argue about our pretend or real legal fictions. At the end of the day, I've said it before, what gives a contract its teeth is the or else bit, a built-in escalation or penalty by agreement. Machiavelli knew what that or else needed to be. Brute force. And in this, Machiavelli made comment that the prince ought to know when to apply each. And you do need both. One without the other, and the system crumbles. Other influences seem to be Cicero, but he had romantic notions of beauty and purity of heart, I think, in the same sense that he recognised that love is strong. If we love our state, if we love our peoples, if we love our neighbour, we could not possibly do harm to any of them. It's only from fear that we might become violent or do harm. As such, he would advocate policies that appealed to the hearts and minds that had the strongest support. Imagine. Machiavelli recognised men are not rational, lack full information availability, seldom recognise when the state is actually trying to make things better. Men make ill-formed judgments and poor decisions, become resentful, contemptuous, fickle and greedy. A sense of loss is stronger than a sense of gain, and by about 2 times, I think. That is, fear is stronger motivator than love, hence the emergence of the notion, is it better to be feared than loved if one cannot have both? Machiavelli departs from Cicero's idealism once more. Do no harm, of course, ideal, except, Machiavelli says, when necessary, and then it must be done as swift as possible, and parlay that into beneficial interest of all as swiftly as possible. Never let a good crisis go to waste, and all that. So I'm wondering if this means we'll make everyone complicit, or whether this is one of those, humane things that if evil things be necessary, they ought to be exactly as necessary and no more. That is, we do not want to wander into deriving pleasure from cruelty, something that I wonder if the cancel culture has misunderstood and has taken cruelty to be a proxy of power, because sometimes power looks cruel, and only absolute power can do cruelty and get away with it. Mackie goes on to make mention of God and recognises, I think, that whether God exists or not, he knew people have a profound belief in such a thing. Therefore, he mapped across the aspirations of being godly, or in keeping with God's intent via prescribed actions. Though he did say God also does not want us to become lazy. We actually have to do the work, make sacrifices, and indeed God is forgiving of those small cruelties necessary in the attainment of the honest, virtuous, secure state of affairs. He is on our side after all. In this, in the mind of the believer, he must accept small cruelties and injustices will be made. It is as God has ordained. Who can argue with that? Who dare? Vice or virtue, the question is irrelevant. My read on Machiavelli's musings on such issues is that identification of vice or virtue is an intellectual exercise. Either can bring down a prince. The essential thing to be aware of is which to use to keep power, and that being done, to reframe a vice as a virtue or a virtue as a vice, as needs make necessary. So to the uninitiated, this looks like that doublespeak and cognitive dissonance. Yeah, the smooth operator, sure. The rest think they're playing 4D chess when they're just bumbling and stumbling, actually with incoherent, dissonant reactions. So Machiavelli starts to lay it all out, and as per the kind of Disney film structure, we move into a kind of backstory. And Machiavelli describes to the reader where principalities come from, where it all starts. Hereditary or acquisitions. Inherited or acquired. In hereditary principalities or states, of course, the citizens are used to being ruled by the prince. Machiavelli's advices are, don't rock the boat too much. All that it takes to lose a principality are to be inept. And if you are exceptional, then sure, knock your socks off. But for the mediocre ruler, just play it safe. Good advice to any newbie CEO taking over from the previous, something Chris Hadfield suggests in his book. First be a zero, then a hero. But coming into a new situation, trying to be a hero before a zero means likely it will actually be a negative multiplier. Also an interesting commentary on why third generation inherited wealth is often lost. The competence and skill to acquire that wealth has not been communicated down the family tree. The subsequent generations only know how to spend it. Shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. Winthorpe the first starts it. Winthorpe the second grows it. Winthorpe the third blows it. Anyway, back in Mackie's time, the serfs kind of recognised that hereditary inheritance was the way it went. Just keep the status quo. Doing so wins favour with the people, but things change, and as long as change keeps the status quo, the causes for change are long forgotten. It's the new principalities that are troublesome, and if you're thinking Bob Iger and the mergers with Pixar, Lucas and Marvel, yeah, in scale, that's about the same thing. And much like the battles described in Disney War and Ride of a Lifetime, when corporations merge, a power struggle ensues as the amalgamated groups jostle to install their man or woman as top dog. Of course they want access to familiar power, with all their yet-to-be-called-in favours from the past. No such leverage with newly installed and alien leaders. Instead, what follows is indeed the Machiavellian machinations. It is the epitome of what occurs. Experience has shown that where a merger or invasion or occupation has subsequently failed, and a second attempt is made, the invader or acquirer is much more brutal and relentless in suppressing sedition and rebellion. Though it does occur that the second attempt sometimes also fails. As mentioned, invasion is easier to enact on similar cultures and places that have similar languages. The thing to note is that generally men, says men in the book, men and women, people, will live in peace as long as their tradition is not adversely affected. They don't really care whose face is on the coin just as long as there's a coin. So all things being equal, those intent on invasion have to suppress absolutely rebellion and potential sedition. That is, kill the existing prince and all his family and ardent supporters. Yeah, I kind of see this played out in the corporate world. I tend not to kill people so much these days, but, you know. This also has a quelling effect that any supporters of the now dead rulers have no cause to fight for, and at the same time have no fear of reprisals from any fragmented legacy rulers that seek revenge upon them for failing to rally to their support and fend off the invader in the first place. Council culture accused the contenders of sex crimes, drug use, malfeasance, scandal, fraud, and besmirched their whole unit. So yeah, annihilate the existing ruling class or family, but keep intact the laws and customs and tax flows. Yes, that's what you're really doing, moving the cash flow. And if you have big plans, doing this several times over will result in considerable cash flow and power base. Imagine with a 30-year plan that you might even start to integrate different languages and cultures into a superstate. And if you can do that, and take note from Adam Smith, streamline a few processes, specialise a few industries, get economies of scale going, reduce cost structures, get discounts for buying in bulk, but keep the tax rates the same, you can get rich. Very fucking rich. Recall Bob Iger, Disney Animations, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, yeah, very, very fucking rich. This is how real wealth is made. It's a series of transactions, roll-ups, consolidations, whatever. I have to ponder though, in regions acquired of different languages and cultures, Sea Duty by Robert Gates, the invasion of Iraq. Just think about that proposition. There you are. You have to seize control and the infrastructure and apparatus of a country that sustains 70 million people that live more akin to cross-tribal, cross-religion social structures rather than top-down democracies. It's a big fucking ask. Machiavelli advises the invader to go and live there, deal with issues in real time and immediately. Not being there means these problems will be escalated, and should the indigenous people realise they can fix it themselves, well, they've seized back their own apparatus. Living there, consuming local resources, is somewhat harmonious. Certainly the PR is better than not even bothering to turn up what has just been captured and having all the assets stripped and pumped away onto oil tank, carried away by horse and cart. Just looks bad. Indeed, any injustices carried out by renegade alien forces can be appealed directly to the new prince, if he is there. Otherwise there's no recourse to that kind of abuse. It's just authoritarian or military rule. We've seen this played out. So sense of justice at least needs to be preserved, or at least be seen to be preserved, otherwise it's not justice, but just us. Machiavelli offers another strategy, sending colonies. Something the British Empire did exceedingly well, probably why it had a large naval fleet at the time, and that fleet is expensive. And well, the books of history talk about how that was funded, and we've mentioned a 2-power standard previously. Just to make the note again, the idea is that the British naval fleet was twice as big as the next single fleet, so that if number 2 and number 3 got together, it still wasn't the size of number 1. And I think we talked a little bit about Lanchester's law somewhere along the line. Yeah, it's all good stuff. Anyway, colonies. Here's how it plays out. So, kick out a few people from their homes in locations around the target city. They will be few and insignificant in terms of retaliatory forces. Be a bit brutal with that. Enough to send the message that so long as there are no repercussions from the installed colony, those witnesses to that brutality and lucky enough to still have their own home and not be kicked out will not suffer the same fate. Yeah, I've seen this being played out in business too. We come in peace, honest. We're just gonna use these tables over here in the corner. Next thing you know, they're draining all your IT resources, using all your phones, and it's just a shit show. Probably why Warren Buffett supports the notion of building moats and infesting those moats with crocodiles to your empire. Keep them out. Yeah, and if anyone steps up to complain, in that office where resources are being taken, you've got to make an example of them. So the level of severity against a small number of disposed must be sufficient to stifle any intent of revenge. I've seen this played out. Shut up, don't complain. You're lucky to have the job. That's how that goes. Colonies cost less and consume much less of local resources and tax flows than a standing army. Sure, taking over a company subversively rather than outright buying it. Force projection and all that, supply lines, so on. A potent, powerful yet bored and remote military starts to find ways to amuse itself. Cruelty, injustice, and then the impossible position of a prince having to play favourites to either the people or your own army. Coming down on one side or the other. Pick one. I think there's something else I've seen in business as well, is you send in the hit squad. To do whatever they need to do, whether it's to depress the share price so you can buy it up cheap, or whether it's to destroy morale so people leave and then you bring in your own people, or whether it's to effectively take over and then have that hit team move on and then you bring in a new set of people that aren't quite so bad. And, framing effects. Machiavelli advisors control the borders. Here we go again, all about having moats and crocodile-infested swamps around your lands. No force equal to the occupying force shall be allowed to enter. The reasons are obvious. Be on guard, though. The disgruntled and recently invaded may well invite in outside forces, even at the cost of paying higher taxes thereafter. See again the ultimatum game. And in modern day parlance, we talked about poison chalices, the poison pill. There are employed strategies to prevent hostile takeovers or to make them so expensive that it becomes non-viable. Perhaps send a little warning note or a caution. Keep in mind, of course, it's true of fascism and horrible totalitarian regimes like that, which seem to be uprising at the moment. It's much easier to suppress them now when they're recognised ahead of time rather than battle that as an equal later, which by then it's too late. Again, the kind of Heisenberg uncertainty principle to, body politics. Early diagnosis is not so certain, but the cure, whichever it is easier to apply at this stage, if only we knew which. Later on, the specific nature of the disease becomes much more obvious, and its treatment even more clear. Yet by then, the disease has become incurable. Risk management to you and me. Childhood memories of playing the game Isolation. I like that one. I haven't played it in years, and I never really got Risk. I played it when I was too young to understand what was going on, and it always seemed like a bit of a nerdy game for the older folk that I was playing against at the time. I think I was only about 7 or 8 years old. I didn't really understand it. But Isolation I quite enjoyed that one. Yeah, so there's all these strategies and tactics, and it's all good stuff, game theory and all that, risk management. Again, I've heard it said about investing that it's not about the timing, it's about time in the market. It is actually about the timing. This whole trick about annual percentage rates, that old thing that's bandied around. So let's just do a quick divergence and look at an example of a 3-year investment. So let's say we've got 10 grand to invest to keep the sums easy, so we can do it in our head and it's obvious, we don't get distracted by calculators. So in scenario 1, in the first year you have shit luck, market drops, Trump's voted out, whatever, Boris has dropped the bomb, and the market drops by 50%. Well, that's not great. So we've had 50% of our value wiped out. We're now at £5,000 worth of stock. Second year, things start to recover. It's not all doom and gloom. Let's say we have a 50% rise in the market. Great. Investment is now worth, 7,500? And suppose good fortune continues in the third year and we see the markets rise by 30%, which gives us our final net asset value of 9,750 quid. Yeah, we've lost 250 quid in net value, but let's look at the percentage rates over the last 3 years. 50% down, 50% up, 30% up. What's the average? 30 divided by 3, 10%. Yeah, we're down. Take another scenario. Year 1, 10%. So we're now at, 11,000. Year 2, another 10%. Well, that puts us at about 12 grand. Third year, another 10%, so that's another 1,200 on there. So what are we? 13 grand and change. 10%, 10%, 30% divided by 3 years for an average percentage rate of 10%. So which 10% would you prefer? Machiavelli cautioned us here too, advises prudence and skill and ability over time. For time brings with it all things, good and bad. Anyone can buy an ETF and lock it in for 5 years and get an APR of 10%. Well, perhaps not 10%, but you can lock in whatever the advertised APR is. But astonishingly, as demonstrated, you can still lose money here. So only the prudent take the time to see the dangers and pitfalls. However, the ETF broker gets paid their fee regardless. So yeah, we might do well to heed Machiavelli's advice on prudence. Something else I've noticed as well in the blogosphere, I kind of only just recently realised this, is that there's a lot of talk about being critical thinkers and everyone's got their favourite logical fallacy and cognitive bias named, and the Dunning-Kruger effect is all popular now, to quote. I actually had a bit of insight with Dunning-Kruger as well when I reconsidered Myers-Briggs personality types and learning and, the age of development, 7 or 8 is 8 years old is the kind of imprinting period, 12, 13, 15, social modelling, 20, 25, I can't remember the final phase, but there seems to be these kind of rough ages of different kind of mental developments. It just struck me that, if you look at the Dunning-Kruger curve, when we're young, we're full of confidence, but we don't know anything. This is kind of explained a little bit by the kind of Myers-Briggs analysis, that you have a predominant learning style or a predominant style of thinking, that you've developed filters on the world and you've developed certainly like a primary processing to the information that's coming in. Gives you certain confidence about things, but you're unaware at that time that there's actually a lot more information than you're processing for. You're unaware actually that you're cognitively impaired. You've not matured to use different kinds of thinking, different kinds of filters, and for many of us, we go through our lives never even being aware of this. Hence Dunning-Kruger. Oh yeah, that's another thing as well. So everyone's talking about being critical thinkers. Again, the laziness comes. It's not laziness; it's just ignorance that they think that their thinking or their opinion counts for critical thinking. It's like when the flat earthers try and talk about rotation speed versus linear speed. Vectors and speed are not the same thing, but because they have a direction and a speed, they don't know what a vector is, so they just think speed and they think they're comparing similar things when they're not. Same thing when we talk about thinking to get our opinion and critical thinking. It seems a lot of these guys haven't stopped to ponder what critical is. It seems that they think that critical just means thinking the same thing over and over and over again until make believe it's true. Critical is, getting versed in formal logic. It's understanding data, probability, statistics, critical factors, analytical methods, all the tools to remove cognitive biases. It's not an easy thing. It's not easy, that's for sure. Of course, any bloody old fool can say, well, I think, well, it's not the same thing. And then there are those who are just out and out dishonest to push their narrative. It just makes it such a messy, noisy world. So yeah, in regard to timing and prudence, Machiavelli advises us not to avoid disorder in order to avoid going to war. War is not avoided, but merely delayed until the optimal time. And should you be careless and cause another to become powerful, it will be ruinous. Case in point, at the time of writing, Trump has stirred up things with Iran. Subsequently, Iran's response is to put Iraq in the firing line as a battleground for the proxy war with the United States. Iraq saw what was coming, and Iraq and Iran seem to understand statecraft. Iraq's response has been to enact a resolution effectively kicking out the United States. Iraq has had foresight enough to realise the potential for disorder and has taken the preemptive action. The resolution states no foreign troops should have access to the land, waters or air. The implications are that Trump has inadvertently disadvantaged the United States forces there, which in effect has strengthened its enemy. Oh dear. Clearly has not read The Prince, or The Art of the Deal, or the Constitution. The resolution by the Iraqi government is a political loss. It's a win for Iran. Well done, Trump. You've kind of lost two wars in one go. Bear in mind also that conquering foreign lands, invading them, is partly about turning them into allies, that they are assimilated economically, trade-wise, or by regime change. For Iraq to pass the resolution effectively kicking out the United States, it's undone everything since the 2003 invasion. So it won't matter if Trump flattens Tehran, it will not win favour with Iraq and restore what has now been lost. It seems also Iraqi airspace was abused in the drone strike on one of Iran's top officials who, it seems, was on his way to the airport to meet with Iraqi's president, so read into that what you like. What a disaster. Classic case. Before that he sold out the Kurds, and Syria is now more under the influence of Russia, for better or worse, but from the US point of view, surely that wasn't the plan. Same in Iraq. If the US does leave, as it's now being asked to do so, any plans, technology, know-how, contingency plans will no doubt be shared with their new partners, likely Russian, who will give it a good looking over for utility and weakness. Then Iraq's new friends will come in with intelligence officers and debrief anyone who has previously had direct contact with US interests to learn about strategies, tactics, intent, immediate plans. Means and methods will be revealed. This is exactly what Machiavelli advises not to do. It's been described as minefield diplomacy. All these carefully considered options, decision trees, contingency plans, and the roots of diplomacy between them are being eroded or destroyed one by tweet edict. It's the ultimate cancel culture, each tweet devaluing or eroding the value of strategic plans and of diplomatic efforts. Iran has stated the nuclear deal is all but in tatters and will start enriching again. It's interesting to note the US response to this, outrage and so on, but at the same time have maintained that Iran has been doing this all along anyway, which is an incoherent response. And I read into that Iran then must actually have been complying until Trump withdrew from that agreement. Widening the frame, do you think Putin, for example, respects Trump? I don't know what the implications of this are in the theatre of international relations, but Machiavelli points out that such a prince who is not respected will not last. And here we see the recent video of Putin and Assad caught mocking Trump. We shall see. Machiavelli then analyses the different efforts required in seizing control of estates that are managed by bureaucrats with the consent of the people, and barons, who are more typically hierarchical class systems of serfdom and servants. The latter is easiest: bribe by, win favour of a few barons and take power by leveraging the influencer of the day. However, influencers do get greedy, and they want a greater percentage of the loot for their troubles. Here, killing the principal ruler in their family wins nothing. That's unstable. The former, naturally, is harder, but you will not be invited in as a potential greater force, and bribing a few lowly and low-end slaves wins no power or favour. Therefore, their strategy here is force, invasion. So once captured, how do you hold on to your ill-gotten gains in regions where laws and traditions have been the way of things? 1. Destroy them. 2. Go and live there. 3. Allow them to continue but divert their tax tributes and install an oligarchy that keeps the state friendly to you. How do you do that? Oh, I don't know, sell off a few state assets at rock bottom prices, that kind of thing. Again, don't rock the boat. Let people live as they have lived mostly, but if you must bleed them dry, do it slowly. It may be of strategic concern or advantage to cut loose certain high-cost domains or principalities where resources would be better allocated elsewhere, but consider the multiplier effect of the enemy should they pick up on your abandoned province. Machiavelli advises never, never, never abandon things. In regard to the instances where principalities have been used to living under a prince now displaced, but not necessarily freely, they are at a loss as to what to do. Win them over, quick, before they decide for themselves. Leaving that to chance might not win favour. I've seen this done by smart and smooth operators in the corporate world. They come in, announce change, swoop in immediately to show you the new and unlocked possibilities, but you need to help them in this. That's what we make of this opportunity is all about. Sell it as a joint venture of new opportunity. And if you really, really have to, bribe the previous prince to tell everyone, yes, this is actually a really good idea. I've no doubt that the new prince will do a really good job if only everyone got behind him, to buy over the few remaining loyalists. In a republic or a self-organised collective or cooperative, the rules are a bit different. Either wipe them out or go and live there. Machiavelli also states that most friendly primates see, and as monkey sees, monkey does. So even better to watch the wise, friendly primate and follow them. So what it's really saying here is that in the case where we're not that smart or don't have great wisdom as the greats, we should aim high in our endeavours, and if our own skills and abilities fall short because we aimed high, we might not come off so bad. So look at the greats, look how they did it. Do as power does. In newly founded corporations, states or principalities then, the difficulty in maintaining them is solely upon the skill of the founder. It's all on you, bruh. And if you did found a large enterprise, as such, you are either very rich to start with, have money, or have brilliance to acquire by other means the necessary resources, or you've just got dumb luck. In the former cases, for any problems, money or skill should mitigate any problems. Should already have those. It's the dumb luck that's the problem. So yeah, the secrets of highly successful people here listed, they always say, go backstage, peek behind the curtain, see how it really works, get the inside scoop. But here it is. Number 1, get your kids in private school or have yourself a classic education. Make sure you've got access to Ivy school. So again, seek parents with fat wallet or connection. Ensure that your career is speeded along with nepotism. Ensure your parents are rich enough to have seed capital for many of your failing projects. Ensure you join all those clubs to find other rich people who can help you out at times of need or make the most of their connections. Pick up their scraps, whatever. Outsource menial tasks. You've got to be free in your time to have all these grandiose ideas. Have good PR. Have a hack journo on your staff that asks you your secrets to success and then have them uncritically publish it. Oh god, the fake gurus on YouTube's and on the internets. Too many to list. Can't remember how does the story go? Oh, I was poor, living in my mum's basement, $47 bank account, sofa, surfing, or I had drug problems, or my cocaine addiction kept me back, and then I realised I bumped into the mentor at the right time, and he told me the secrets, and here I'm going to share them with you. Oh boy. So yeah, the mini list there is, I think, much closer to the truth. The single most reliable indicator of future wealth is having rich parents. That isn't really a saleable course, is it? You can't really wrap a package around how to have rich parents. And it's actually kind of quite defeatist as well. Kind of reminded of that Catch Me If You Can film, Frank Abagnale. But, for all his success and genius, he was defrauding people, he was causing a lot of damage, and didn't he go to jail in the end? I think he went to jail, didn't he? So Machiavelli also makes note of opportunity as something more subtle than dumb luck. You may wander into a situation that has charge or tension. Stumbling upon the location or the opportunity was the dumb luck bit. The fact that you had the perception to see that there was tension there also provides the opportunity. You then have to have the skill and the perceptive prowess to see it, and even more skill to operate on that to your advantage. Long live the INTJ and the ESTP. There's problems all over the world, but are you connected? Do you have access to resource? Will people give it to you? Are you crate worthy enough? Strange, isn't it? The idea of the business plan, the idea of looking at people's personal history and this kind of illusion that how you do one thing is how you do all things. That looking at people's previous behaviour is somehow a projection on how things will happen in the future. Maybe the past was just all dumb luck. And now that they actually have to go and work for it, they're incompetent. Sometimes I go too deep thinking on this because I think sometimes even when we recruit people on that basis that we can't, we don't have good indicators about people's future performance, so we use their past performance. And if you even think about what it was like being employed in the, say, early 90s, even then having written contracts wasn't so commonplace. A lot of it still went on a handshake, but now it seems, fucking hell, you need your full MBTI profile, complete Google search, your PR to be clean, 1,000 references cross-checked on your Facebooks, complete diversity training before you're even considered to have a contract put in front of you. It just seems excessive. But then maybe this is what the nature of things right now. I was just talking to a friend recently about their hiring policy at a supermarket for shelf stackers. They're getting 200 applications a week, and some of these interviews in total are taking 5 hours. And it's kind of a prerequisite that people applying for these jobs know how to do team building exercises and how to have leadership roles. I'm thinking this is an entry level job, and you're expecting people to have management skills and team building skills at 18? Well, if you can get it, great. Wow. So what kind of 18-year-olds do you know that have team building skills and management skills? Private schools, Ivy League connections, and the abuse of interns as well. That's just shocking. By the way, if you're thinking about going on an internship, the statistics show that you're actually no better off. You might as well just take the year out. I think the difference in people who have had an internship and those who didn't counts for about 3/4 of a percentage point more likely to get the job. So that's what your year gets you, 3/4 of a percentage point. Again, I'm thinking, take the advice of Machiavelli, no one cares, no one's going to hand it to you. You've got to build this little ecosystem of your own insider world. You've got to own it all. You've got to own the kind of the prospects. You've got to own the technology. You've got to own the market. It's got to be all yours. You've got to build that community, and you can't do it alone. So, I keep again mentioning these kind of partnerships that I've come across over the years. Bob Iger mentioned the same thing. You usually have a maverick type with an accountant type. Myers-Briggs, it's an ESTP type, the archetypal entrepreneur, and the INTJ, the archetypal architect or strategist, to build out those support systems and corporate structures. So, partner with someone, especially rich parents. So, there you go. This is spotting opportunity or undervalued assets and knowing how to parlay the tension into value. A little bit of controversy. Some people have analysed Machiavelli, according to a Myers-Briggs type indicator. Some have rated him as an INTJ. I suspect this is an error in application. His book, The Prince, itself contains the blueprints, the structural analysis. However, he wrote the book after the actual doings, which I think makes him an ENTP for those keeping track. Curious, clever, seeks to comprehend systems, people and principles around them. INTJs are supplementary in this function. They seek to improve systems, solve problems and see possibilities of intellectual nature, but sometimes lack the do bit. But on occasion will assume the leadership role, only when invited or even tacitly invited. That is, they won't step up and say, I'm going to do this leadership. But they will take it when other people say, hey, you should go and do this because you're really good at it. Then they'll do it. Or if an incompetent leader steps up and falls and everyone says, that was an incompetent leader, why don't you have a go at it? Yes, okay, I will. They have to be invited. They always seem to be waiting for permission. Well, it's not even permission, that's not quite right. They want other people to have a good experience. And there's always kind of a weird presumption that INTJs seem to have, is that they think that somebody else will be able to provide a better experience than they can. But if there's no one else around, then it falls on them. Or if somebody else is around who's clearly given everyone a bad experience, then they're justified in stepping in, because if they do a better job, it lifts the experience of all involved. So kind of like, I suppose INTJ types come across the enslaved peoples in a conflict zone, see the opportunity, and if they have the nouns to execute, there's money in conflict resolution, of course. And then suffer the innovator's dilemma, seeing new opportunity in installing new systems leads to new problems as yet unseen, requiring new solutions, and off we go, constant improvement. What did Schumpeter say? Destructive innovation or something, right? So caution then to the new prince who brings innovation. These new ways and automation and planned obsolescence will upset the old guard, and the skeptics and incredulous may additionally resist change. The old diffusion of innovation curve. What do we have? The innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and the laggards. Is that it? Yeah, that's the whole subject in of itself. Yeah, so this naturally creates a required asymmetry of attack. The old guard will pile on, the skeptics will hold judgment, may not defend or dogpile, and in doing so may even put themselves at risk from the old guard. Yeah, this is classic diffusion of innovation problems. Adoption of innovation, some people are resistant to it, some people love it, some people actively resist it, then the majority gets hold of it, and then the laggards have to take it up or also just get left behind. I mean, you look at mobile phones and how the banking sector is now introducing enforced two-factor authentication, mostly through text message or mobile phone application, which means you have to have a mobile phone now. Which means you have to have the app, presumably from, Google Play, which interfaces all your fucking bits and pieces in your phone and fucks it all up. Yeah, I see a bit of a future with a bit of a divide between technologists and those who resist technology. Yeah, I can already see the seeds of it. We get a lot of this online. Well, you've seen it. Anti-GMO, anti-vaccines. Some crazy batshit idea of going back to the 1950s where traditional life was better. 1950s, where you didn't even have a shitter in your own house, didn't have mains gas supply, didn't have reliable electric, certainly didn't have telephones and communication devices that made life easier. It was a fucking hard grind, hard life. Up at 5 o'clock to go down the mine, back at 7, and dinner better be on the table, bitch, or else you're getting thrown down the stairs. That's 1950s. I mean, fucking hell, was it recently it was 1971, I think it was in the UK, or was it America? 1971, the Banking Reform Act or something that actually made it legal. A legal requirement that banks could not discriminate giving mortgages to single women just because they were women. Wow. You want to go back to before those kind of things? Holy shit. I mean, I can see what they're saying. Back then you could just about get by on a single person's income. Now you need 3 and there's only 2 of you. Yeah, seems I was even looking at US house prices. What you get for $600,000 is fucking crazy. Can't quite put my finger on it, but it just seems so many things about a place. It seems like so many people are unemployed or out of a job or working 0 hours contracts, not having a fulfilled week of income. Yet things are so expensive. You think, who's paying for it? Where's the money coming? It just doesn't add up. Something really weird. It's just, I don't know. I'll have to look into it. That's not what this one's all about. Yeah, so Machiavelli also cautions those who come into great fortune, and here he means both luck and inheritance, I suppose. Yeah, I read a book recently about the lottery conversion industry. I think that's what it's called. So, say for example in the United States, where the super and mega jackpots are in the multi-hundreds of millions of dollars, and people do occasionally win them. Of course, it's paid out as an annuity, and that's a negotiable instrument. So these lottery firms are compelled to convert the annuities to sell them off in chunks. So you get firms specialising in acting as intermediaries between winners and the lottery companies or other third-party buyers of that instrument. Yeah, these intermediaries will exchange lumps of cash for the long-term cash flow of those annuities, obviously discounted for compensation of interest. The stories in the book are quite sad. It's someone who's had a bit of a hard life gets a windfall, fortuitous, good luck, goes out and secures the bling against bank loans, but miscalculates, runs out of short-term cash, and then constantly goes back to these cash converters to sell ever-increasing amounts of their annuities at ever-increasing discount rates to meet short-term demand. Of course, these intermediary companies also bring with them all sorts of trinkets and nice things that they could buy only if they converted just a little bit more of the annuity. We've seen it all before. A young lottery winner. There was actually a case recently of a YouTuber offering $1 million prize, which someone won. After tax, that was about 650 grand. The young kid could have, I think it's 23, 25, could have bought a XXX, got in tenants, lived there in the one of the apartments rent-free, in effect, and put surplus income into a modest investment that would have given him about $1,000 per month. Imagine that. 25 years old, effectively retired, got your own home, bills paid for, passive income. But we know what he did. 300 grand car, which will be worthless in 10 years, 100 grand wristwatch, plus iPads for all his mates, which will be obsolescent in 5 years. So instead of being retired, he will again be poor in less than 10 years. At which time he will be 35 with a CV that says, done nothing, or any skills would have perished unless he's been active. Great opportunity to have educated himself, got high skills, more qualifications, just in case. But of course, nah. So the point Machiavelli is making, and indeed what we've seen with the Trump's recent faux pas, reliance on luck and the charity of granted power is unstable and unpredictable. They do not know how to maintain a position, as they did not acquire the knowledge to get there. Trump is not a politician. Some might argue he's not even a businessman, but the shortcuts and imposition of power in business is not the same as the finesse required in diplomacy. But we shall see. As that old saying, sleeveless to sleeveless in 3 generations. Coming in from outside, you don't have the power base or loyalty of people in the institution, so you have to bring outsiders in, and this is what we see. So the outsiders come in, they too are outsiders to the political machinery, and they don't fit, so what they do is they start kicking out everyone else. It's kind of playing out as Machiavelli describes. To those who inherit such fortunes, and Machiavelli doesn't mean fortunes like we mean it today, but power is what Machiavelli means. Machiavelli states that they should quickly acquire the expertise and retrospectively build in the foundations to their power base. Of course, we can build foundations after the house is built. It's expensive, it's dangerous, and requires much greater skill doing it that way than doing it the easier way. But the easier way is that long-term process of when you're 17 or 18, join the local political party, spend a few years in there, build up your foundation, create your contacts, grassroots, blah, blah, blah. Even Ronald Reagan, he did about years worth of cross-country travel and getting well known as part of his PR for General Electric. And here we are, we've got Bob Iger hinting that he might think about the presidency. We've got Michael Bloomberg spending fortunes trying to do it as well. It seems very much that the presidency is for sale. So I think Machiavelli makes subtle commentary on the consequences of being immersed in the culture of the society and living through the laws of the land that you've just taken over, being snapped into it anew, dropped in from a foreign land with totally different cultures and very different societies and laws. It's a lot of clash to get over. Now, this is the point, I suppose, that the people, you, me, us, we can adopt attitudes and be self-actualizing about our morals and infuse those around us to construct ethical frameworks. From this, a society, as it were, will emerge, kind of self-regulating. The values and the legacies of traditions and ceremony might have a conservative drag on this, but eventually the older are upped and outed. New blood in the base. Culture changes. Where culture and society and kind of social contracts aren't sufficient, I suppose explicit laws can be enacted. And I don't know whether it was by local design, this kind of trifecta seems to be emergent and has a particular reflexive feedback built in. Very naive on political theory and social science. I wonder if there is something to be thought about here, though. Who should be the driving force of how we live our lives? Relevant and useful culture and society? Or laws written by bureaucrats and establishments far, far away? I don't know. You decide. There it is again. We're all being polite. Let me decide then, and let me make a decision. All the while, though, money and power is getting those laws changed that I have to adhere to. Yeah, there's that going on.